So, our favorite Chud, Jonathan Doyle, has a new video on how to combat woke capitalism. So let's see how Doyle is doing.
Coca-Cola after an internal memo showed diversity training where employees were told to be, quote, less white. It's part of a company racism training program. People taking part are given advice on how to be less white, less arrogant, less certain, less defensive, and less arrogant. A spokesperson for Coke said it's just part of training meant to create a, quote, inclusive workplace.
I do. So I think there's a lot of learning.
How much time do you think John put into the scary filters and music for these news segments? Under over an hour.
Place and a lot of awareness that is happening. I wasn't as aware 7 years ago when I had my son about the racist images in a lot of Dr. Seuss's children's books.
Story everybody's talking about this morning, that big rebrand of Mr. Potato Head, the classic children's toy, now has a gender neutral name. And
I hope this video is at least John Doyle saying this is like it's not worth it for the right to get pissed off about these things.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh!
Back off, commie.
Hello there, ladies.
Oh no! Oh no!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heck Off Commie. I know what you're thinking. Why are you still in the original studio? What has become of the interim studio, of the new studio? Relax, we're getting there. But in the meantime, I came back to Michigan to pick up a few things and also to record two very important videos for you guys to tide you over until the new studio is up and running, at which point the content kitchen will be firing on all cylinders. We'll be cranking out videos like the Biden administration bombing Middle Eastern countries. You love to see it. But before we get into the meat and potatoes...
John, you're a Trump supporter. Trump also did that. Trump also did that.
What we're talking about here today, I do want to go over...
And that's not whataboutism, by the way. I think they're both bad. I don't like when Biden does it, and I didn't like when Trump does it. Equally.
For a few things as it pertains to the channel as a whole that I think are important. I'll probably have to explain
So his parents are still in Michigan then? Yeah, he must finally be moving out of his parents' house. Good for John.
Jersey here at some point, but before we even get into that, I have to tell you something. I have to remind you of something, which I'm sure you already know because you're a genius, you have agency, you analyze the trends, and that is the fact that we're living in uncertain times, and millions have come to realize
Here comes the ad read.
The importance of the Second Amendment.
Just gonna shill for holsters.
Let's address We the People, holsters.com/Doyle.
I wish I was on a coupon. Someone put me on a coupon.
Peopleholsters.com/Doyle. Very epic. Now, let's address the elephants in the room, and I plan on repeating all of this information in the other video as well because I think it's important, and so I might just shamelessly recycle the footage, but I'll put a timestamp up right now so that you can skip this if you'd like. But about 2 weeks ago, I put out a 2-hour-long dissertation on the harms of pornography that is literally irrefutable, hundreds of sources, and I did...
Both Jake and I talked about it at length, so not irrefutable. What did he say, 8:40? Is he just gonna shill for his porn thing for 8 minutes?
Did this all completely free of charge, maybe because I really do just care, maybe it's like Elijah Schaefer said, maybe I'm mildly autistic, I don't know, but the point being that the video was posted. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for participating involuntarily in the meta commentary on the importance of delayed gratification. It was all a metaphor, but I do just want to take a second to talk about that video because the responses have been overwhelmingly positive and inspirational. The comments, emails, messages, everything. And you might remember that the video was literally being censored by Google after it was posted. Like you could search for it on YouTube or on Google word for word and it wouldn't show up, but then you search for it on like DuckDuckGo or something and it would come.
Yeah, probably because you're talking about adult film material would be my guess.
Come right up. And it couldn't just be because the title of the video contained the word porn, because
careful at the end of that video, maybe finish it without the video on screen. Oh, this one? Oh, yep. I'm actually aware of that part. So yeah, good to know. Thank you. Oops, not what I wanted.
Other videos with that word and their titles would come up, including the one that we did last year, which was much less thorough. And that really just puts into perspective what we're up against.
Let me see. Let's give it a shot. John Doyle, porn. It's right there. Why is it on there twice? Oh, he has 2 different videos about it. Gotcha. Yeah. This one's only 23 minutes, and this one's an hour 42. Why do you cover it twice? Shows right up. Maybe incognito tab? Let me do an incognito tab. Can you guys see that? Hold on. No, you can't. Let me switch to the incognito tab. Oh, it's not going to let me? Okay, fine. YouTube.com. John Doyle porn. Yeah, no, it shows up right away on the incognito tab, too. I want to show you guys for, like, proof, but I'm having trouble. There we go. Maybe. There we go. This is the incognito window. I'm not signed in or anything. If you type John Doyle porn, both those videos come up, as well as his channel. Immediately. So, yeah. He's wrong. He's wrong. At least now. I don't know what was happening earlier, but maybe he was just paranoid.
Against, because that video wasn't some big treatise against leftist economics or anything even explicitly political. That part was additive. That was the only part that is relatively up for debate. That video proved that pornography is extremely addictive, that it has addicted the vast majority of the men in this country.
No, it didn't. You can't claim your own video proved something unless it's like a math thing and you actually, like, it didn't. Oh, maybe, yeah, so they might have had safe search turned on. John Doyle's fans need safe search turned on because if they see a stray elbow, they might get a boner and have to masturbate.
And that it is harming them psychologically, spiritually, sexually, etc. It proved that. And then from there, I extrapolated that if we continue to exist in that condition, then we will ultimately lose our country. That part I still believe, but I acknowledge that's just my inference. But the rest is irrefutable. And so what that means at the very least is that they wanted to stop you from realizing that our country's men are harming themselves and perhaps that you're harming yourself.
John, Google doesn't know you exist personally. This is what I don't get about, like, how do I put this? When someone like this, or someone like Terrence Popp will be like, YouTube is censoring me. No one at YouTube knows you exist. Unless you have, like, 10 million subscribers, YouTube does not know you exist. They do not care. They're filtering out certain words, or you have safe search turned on. They are not targeting you specifically. They don't know you exist. John, you only have 290,000 subscribers. That's a decent number, but it's not enough for YouTube to give a shit.
Which, if you remember, is something that I said in the video, that they literally want to hurt you. And if you subscribe to what I believe is a completely reasonable inference, which I outlined in that video as well, it also means that we're correct in saying that the people pulling the strings are using pornography as a weapon against you because they know that it demoralizes you and will eventually enable them to totally conquer you. So just keep that in mind, because ultimately this channel was not started
Actual Jake is better. That's definitely true.
To recite decades-old arguments against centrally planned economies. It was not started to introduce...
Don't ban the troll yet. I want to see if they're actually creative or if they're one of the same people. Oh, they got timed out. Okay, that's fine. I like to see if the trolls actually say anything create... No, it's fine. I like to see if the trolls ever actually come up with something interesting to say, or if it's the same shit posting. It's usually the same shit posting.
Contemporary arguments in favor of federalism. It was very simply started to help people, and that's not a virtue signal. Like, speaking very honestly, it's actually a political strategy, because, you know, obviously we care about helping people, but I'll share with you something that I realized a very long time ago, which is that this battle that we're in, if it were an intellectual battle, then we'd never lose, but we are. We're losing badly.
As we all know, the biggest brains on the planet are always Republicans, which is why colleges are full of Republicans.
Have been for a very long time, and that's because it's a spiritual battle, and we're not well. That's why we're losing, and so we want to help people, because ultimately that is the pathway to success for us, and that's why this channel is so heavily targeted, because they know that if we can heal enough people spiritually, then we will just march down the field, and we just...
It's targeted because you're fashy and have literally advocated for physiogamy before, John. You're 2 steps away from starting to goose step. Maybe stop it, and you'll stop being demonetized.
Made some pretty decent progress with that. We just helped thousands of people break or begin to break their pornography addictions. Imagine what that butterfly effect is going to look like. I'm thinking about getting billboards too. Spread awareness? I don't know. More on that later. But the point is that we all knew that this video was...
Please, John, waste your money on billboards to tell people to stop jerking it. I really want to see that billboard.
Going to help a lot of people, and it has, and that's great. And just today, it's a Jacob Wool moment, but I was in a coffee shop, I was planning out these videos. I'm there for 10 minutes, and this kid comes up to me, and if you follow me on Instagram, you saw this because I posted on my story about it. You should definitely follow me, by the way, because I post pretty good content throughout the day. But he comes up to me, and he's like, bro.
He looks I shouldn't. Nope, I don't like to talk about how people look. Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it.
Bro, your video changed my life. I'm done with porn, bro. I'm done. Total Chad, totally high energy. But of course, this is just one side of the coin.
Imagine seeing John Doyle in a coffee shop or something, and you go, I gotta go talk to that guy and tell him I used to have a big problem with how many big nuts I used to do. John Doyle, thanks for helping me. I used to do so many big cummies. Thanks for stopping me. I appreciate it. Now I'll retain my seed.
Because remember, we knew that it was going to help the boys take control of themselves, but we also knew that we were going to get lots of backlash from the weak, pathetic, degenerate men of society, and we were correct, because of course, we're always correct. And it's important to note that I could have made a 2-hour video about why vanilla ice cream is inherently right-wing, which it is, and nobody panics because it's all part of the plan. But you make 2-hour anti-pornography dissertation, well then everybody panics because it's not part of the plan, because it highlights their degeneracy and their deviancy and their insecurities, and so they have to attack it. Painfully predictable.
John Doyle, I talk about almost every single video you post, and so does Jake. You're a hilarious lol cow. Like, look at all the, look at, out of your past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Out of your last 12 videos, I've covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've covered a majority of your videos. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was about porn, although that did make it funny. Because all the no-fap people are pretty funny to me. Look, if you genuinely don't want to masturbate, that's fine. That's your choice. But the self-righteousness that no-fap people tend to have is always really funny to me. Like, they think that keeping their cum in their balls is somehow going to give them superpowers. Just weird shit.
And so I would just like to take a second to illustrate the difference between the types of people that we're dealing with.
This video's definitely getting demonetized, by the way. That's freeing in a way, you know? Say whatever I want.
Here. Take a look at the coffee chat. I'll point out what we're all seeing. I'll point out the obvious. You've got an extremely positive canthal tilt. Those are the hunter eyes. You've got a steep angle on the brow ridge as indicated by the sheer volume.
Yep, here comes the physiognomy shit again. I'm not a Nazi. I just think the way people look is indicative of their moral spirit.
Of his eyebrows, obviously the locks of flowing hair, wider set nasal bridge, and the cope shield makes it difficult, but you can still see there's a very strong jawline present. He was about 6'1", solid shoulder to waist ratio, and so you take this guy, you take the...
John knows a sexy man when he sees one, okay? John is a bit of a, you know, he avoids all the harlots on the internet. He doesn't deal with the pornography. So in order to keep his mind sharp, he always brings up pictures of perfectly built men to keep his mind on the prize, okay? Can't be about all these sluts out here taking pictures of their soft bodies. Curvy, soft, disgusting bodies. John Doyle knows. He needs to focus. You gotta pay attention to what you want to be. So he spends all his time looking at hard, glistening, oily, rock hard defined male bodies, okay? That's what you gotta do if you want to be a real Republican man.
The coffee chat. Now compare him to any one of the guys who got triggered by my anti-porn dissertation. I don't think I need to explain any further. I think the vindication speaks for itself here. You have the average porn fan versus the average hawk appreciator.
I always like when John Doyle's arguments are so bad, he just goes, people who disagree with me are ugly. Cool. You want to actually discuss any of the points that were made? It's funny how ugly people are beating the shit out of you verbally, and then all you can do is go, but you're ugly, though! Yeah, I am. Now about the things you said.
That's all I'll say about that. There's a strong connection between your spiritual health and your outward appearance, and
This is what I'm saying. Why do people call me a Nazi or a fascist? I don't know, man. Probably the physiognomy stuff, amongst other things.
aforementioned dichotomy exemplifies that quite well. It's like we talked about in the video, the horseshoe theory of practical intelligence. You've got the low IQ, well, you're ugly. And you got the average IQ, well, that's actually an ad hominem attack. And then you've got the high IQ, You look spiritually unwell. Therefore, I will not listen to you, though I will pray for you.
You're not on the opposite end of the horseshoe, John. You're just on the dumb end, but you convinced yourself you're a super genius. For some reason? I don't know why.
Needs dopamine when you have vindication, boys. The last thing I'll say, though, a lot of people have been asking how they can help the channel or help what we do as far as that goes. I don't know. As far as like the channel goes, the best thing to do, go to the website, heckoffcommie.com, get a membership over there. That's how we keep the lights on. That's how we're able to do this, do cooler stuff, make better content, put up billboards, who even knows. And I try to only talk about it like once a month or so because I don't like plugging it. But, you know, if you want to help, that's the best way. And then you get access to a bunch of cool features through the website. And we're going to be putting a lot more content on the website once we get the new studio, the stew, as Proxy Cameraman Aldo calls it, up and running. A lot more content in general is going to be coming out. We got big plans for this year. Very exciting. So if you want to help, go to the website, get a membership. It's only a couple bucks a month. And then you're literally helping bring people to our side, making them more disciplined, ultimately helping to build a pretty strong coalition.
Can we get to
we're excited. Remember, the more memberships we sell, the sooner I can have kids. And so if you're curious to see what happens when I start multiplying.
Oh, no. Oh, the poor person who decides to breed with John Doyle. That's going to be bad. That's going to be real bad.
That's the way to do it. I actually, jokes aside, I think that'll introduce opportunities to teach about homeschooling, building relationships with other young...
Oh, God, his kids are going to be the fasciest fascists to ever fash. It's going to be terrible.
Conservative families, things like that. I don't know too much about...
Doesn't he still live at home? He's literally moving out like this week. He's moving out this week and he's already talking about having children. John Doyle is way too young to have children. He's 21 years old, John. John, do not have children right now, for the love of God. If you can, God forbid, find someone to let you finally dump 14 years of no-fap seed in them, do not have children, please, for the love of God. Those kids are going to be so messed up.
About that right now, but when I do and I'm working through those things, I think it'll be good to share with people. So anyways, that's that. Very epic. And now we will talk about woke capitalism, which is something that has totally blindsided
I said 14 years. I picked a random number. He'd be too young for that to be a you know what I mean.
We never expected it, and we really don't have any idea how to combat it. And even now, no one is really offering any solutions, and so I figured that I'd throw my hat in the ring, give my thoughts, but I'll start by talking about my jersey here, because I've had this Patriots sticker on my laptop for a while, and people are always like, oh, he's a Patriots fan, and so I'll explain the lore, which is basically that I'm not necessarily a Patriots fan, and I'm not even necessarily a football fan, I'm just a Tom Brady fan, and that's for two reasons. The first of which being that he's a great source of inspiration for me, because people keep being like, Tom Brady's gonna lose, and then
Hannah coupon. Let me look. Having sex once in the location of your choosing. It's a sex coupon. All right, I'll take it. When you say in the location of your choosing, is this about the venue or the other meaning of that phrase?
Tom Brady keeps being like, disagree. And then the other one is that I noticed that all of the worst people in the world consistently root against Tom Brady because he's white, because he's a Trump supporter, most importantly, because he's 6.
I don't think anyone, says things about Tom Brady, at least not in any significant number, because he's white? I don't know football, though.
Successful, and leftism is fundamentally just the political mobilization of the insecure, and they hate winners because it reminds them that they're losers, and so they hate Tom Brady because Tom Brady wins games. And I could literally make this into its own 2-hour dissertation. Why supporting Tom Brady is inherently right-wing.
I have no opinion on this. I don't think I've sat through an entire game of football in my entire life, so I got nothing on this one.
But I will finish by saying that as conservatives, we acknowledge and respect hierarchy. We acknowledge that success and competence are things to be aspired to, not to be envied or punished. And that requires accepting that Tom Brady is the GOAT. And I don't even want to hear, well, Deflategate, well, he kissed his son on the lips. Yeah, who spoon-fed you those narratives? The communist mainstream media, that's who.
You know, all these communists accusing people of kissing their children on the lips. CNN is not communist. What are you... ESPN is not communist. What are you talking about?
We're about to get into the NFL, how it ties into woke capitalism. I have a lot to say. I haven't been behind the desk as much as...
Ah, yes. NFL's woke capitalism. The same NFL that ended up firing, what's-his-face for kneeling during the national anthem. very woke.
I would have liked to have been recently.
Colin Kaepernick, thank you. I don't do the football.
Tie this up by saying that the window of appreciation for white male excellence is closing, and so...
Don't worry, John. I don't think you were ever going to be in that category anyway. It's fine.
Have fun with it while you can, because it's closing quickly. Because even when Brady signs to a new club after 20 years in New England and wins yet another championship at 43 years old, you have people claiming it's racist just because he's white. And if trends continue, then white men aren't going to be able to be successful at anything anymore because we'll have
I like that he didn't source that article because it's definitely an article based on like one dipshit's tweet. Don't you hate articles like that are like, people are outraged about X, and then you read the article and it's like one idiot tweeted something stupid and it's just like outrage for the sake of outrage? Hate that.
Abdicate and yield to women and people of color because it's not about equality of opportunity anymore, and it's not even about equality of outcome anymore. It's about everyone getting a seat at the table except the white men because they think that you're...
It's really not. It's not at all. Who told you that, John? Why are you claiming that?
Or evil. It's actually total equality of outcome. It's like cumulative equality of outcome in the macro timeline, because what they're saying is, well, you know, white people occupied these positions in the past, so now they can't anymore to make up for that because that's how we solve racism. So
no, I think typically when they're talking about stuff like this, it is equality of opportunity, right? The idea being that, like, I don't know, how do I put this? Disproportionately, NFL, and again, I don't like talking about sports because I don't do fucking sports. Historically, disproportionately, quarterbacks have been white people, despite the fact that a lot of the NFL is dominated by black athletes. Like, people pointing stuff like that out and being like, why is that?
enjoy it while you can. Enjoy your Tom Brady's, enjoy your Donald Trumps, your PewDiePies, your Mike Lindells, your Jake Pauls, all while you can, because the woke doctrine is a cancer. It's not self-contained.
Wait, is Logan Paul an example of white male excellence? That is a steep curve you are grading on right there. Jesus Christ.
And it's going to spread everywhere. And again, this doesn't mean that people who aren't white men can't be good at things. Professional sports as a whole are like disproportionately dominated by black men. It's just to say that for whatever reason, white men are told that they have to apologize for being good at things simply because they're white, and that's dumb. So
who in society as a dominant force is asking that? Who is asking that, John? Again, you're stirring up outrage in your audience over an imaginary problem you are claiming exists that doesn't.
You know. But anyways, the NFL is a good segue into what we're talking about, because the NFL is an example of something that has monetized political correctness very successfully, especially considering the degree to which it exists in American society. And I'm not saying that this is done necessarily with malicious intent, but I'll give you two examples. And the first one is applicable to all professional sports, which is that they exist to monetize what is effectively inconsequential and politically correct tribalism. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with sports, with following sports. That's not the point. The point is that the average American man, having been fed propaganda throughout his entire life, is sooner to take issue with someone criticizing his sports team than his state, his country, his church, etc.
Is he mad that people are football fans instead of nationalists? Oh, God.
Like, we don't even know what it means to be a man anymore. We don't know how we're supposed to exist in society. We don't know what it means to be an American.
John Doyle knows what it means to be a man, and it's not coming for a decade, okay? That's what real men do.
We don't know what our purpose is, and so we just invest all of that into sports ball, and we buy the tickets and we watch.
You did a sports ball joke. Even I don't really do the sports ball joke anymore because that's been dated since like 2010.
The games, and we identify with our team, and we will live and die by it as though it's something more important than what it really is, which is literally just a sports team. And again, this
is John gonna do sports are the opiates of the masses?
Not to say that sports don't bring people together or that they're unimportant. This is just to say that human nature is predisposed towards tribalism, us and them, which, by the way, doesn't mean that the them group is bad or worse than the us group, just that they're different, which is an obvious reality. And we're not allowed to acknowledge the existence of us in terms of nationality, in terms of faith, in terms of culture, in terms of gender now, but we're...
What are you talking about? White, straight Christian men are like the biggest political group in America. What are you talking about?
Totally allowed to channel all of that into the incredibly lucrative and totally woke enterprise of professional sports. Daddy, today at school we learned that America was founded upon racism and genocide, and that white people owe reparations to everyone who isn't white. Oh, and also that Russell Wilson is closer to being a top 5 QB than Aaron Rodgers. Damn it, I told you we need to take kids out of schools.
Does John Doyle know what schools are like? Because that's not what schools are like.
It's the same thing with the last Super Bowl. Politically correct tribalism. Remember the Will Ferrell ad? Beat Norway. Norway's lame. Grr, Norway. Everyone thought that's so funny. Why? Because it was
I don't remember that ad.
funny. Picking petty fights
I
with
don't
other
watch ads, typically.
countries during one of the most widely broadcast events in the year is objectively a good bit. But ask yourself this, are we ever going to see a Beat Mexico commercial or something similar? No, we're not. We're not going to see a let's bring our jobs back from Mexico type commercial, because that would be offensive, because Mexico isn't a white country.
Generally, the rule in comedy is punching down. Not a great strategy. Punching up is usually the way to get laughs. If you wanted to know how to actually be funny, John.
You can only poke fun at white countries and white people, just like you can only criticize white countries and white people. And this is what woke capitalism does. General Motors, which is one of the biggest companies in the country, they take out an ad during the Super Bowl, which is one of the most significant events on the calendar of the United States, and they get funny man Will Ferrell to be funny, and they basically get to tease the literal...
Is Will Ferrell considered a funny man in 2021? Wasn't his last funny movie Elf? When did Elf come out? Hold on. Let's look at his IMDb. This is the important part of John Doyle's video. I've stopped giving a shit about John Doyle's shitty political takes because he just repeats himself constantly and beats the drum of right-wing culture war, so this is more interesting. Barb and Star go to Del Mar. I haven't seen that yet, although he's just a producer anyway. Didn't see Eurovision. Didn't see Holmes and Watson. I heard it was terrible. Didn't see Vice. Didn't see Daddy's Home 2. Saw Daddy's Home. It was bad. Anchorman 2 wasn't good. He was in Tim and Eric's $1 billion movie, but he was barely in it. But he was funny in that, but that's because I like Tim and Eric. The Other Guys was okay. So his last movie that I thought was at least okay was 2010. His last funny movie was like 11 years ago. And even then, it was funnier back then because I was younger. I don't think if I watched it today, I'd find it as funny. And prior to that, probably Step Brothers, which would have been in 2008. So, yeah, where was Elf on this list? Oh, that was just a truncated, hold on. Control F. Elf. Where's Elf? God damn it, give me Elf, you bitch. 2003. Elf was in 2003. Elf almost came out 20 years ago? Oh no! I feel like I just aged 100 years in 3 seconds. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, consider this. What? Oh God. Elf is almost 20 years old, so... Okay. So Elf is as old today as... Elf is as old today as Gremlins was when Elf came out. Does that make sense? Or Rocky 4. Elf is further away from today than Elf was from Lethal Weapon. Jesus Christ. Okay, we should probably talk about John Doyle now.
Literal country of Norway, like, hee hee, hey, Norway, we're
Doyle was 4 years old when Elf came out. True.
gonna get you. We're gonna, we're coming to get, we're going to get you. And then everyone's happy. We feel this manufactured sense of unity as a country because we're mobilizing our screen people during the big game to bully a European country. But then the reality of the situation is that General Motors has a pretty bad habit of pouring jobs into other countries to displace American workers. Because as we'll talk about, woke capitalism...
I guess you shouldn't have free trade deals unless you also have freedom of movement for workers then. Funny how that works.
Has no ties to country. They don't care about America. They don't care about the American people. They just care about money, and they view you as a source of that. And they know that if they put funny man on the screen and tease the silly Europeans for a minute and a half, then they can make you clap like a seal. And so
is John Doyle just now realizing that advertising is inherently manipulative? He is young, but I didn't think he was that young.
Understanding woke capitalism, we have to be clear, because woke capitalism doesn't mean the coffee shop in your neighborhood that has the gender-neutral bathroom signs. That's not what we're talking about. We're basically talking about conservatives having a real
I'm very woke. I have 2 gender-neutral bathrooms in my house.
Caesar moment when the big businesses in capitalism that we've spent the last 40 years shilling for are actually working.
It's not even a sign on the door. It's just a door. People go and pee and poop. It's degeneracy city up in here.
Steadfastly against us and our interests. And so to answer the question, how do we combat woke capitalism? Some will say we can boycott. As you may have noticed, that doesn't actually work. Some will say go woke. Get woke, go broke. You may have noticed that it actually isn't true. And even if it were true, it wouldn't matter because they're not actually going broke.
John Doyle throwing shade at Jeremy. I'm here for that.
Worst case scenario, they're losing like a little bit of money, but even that doesn't matter because what we're finding out is that people don't actually pursue what is most profitable. They pursue what is most valuable. And there is a difference because money is just a physical manifestation of value. And so what we're learning is that to the Leninists occupying these companies,
Can we have a hats off to all the Leninist, ooh, beautiful bangs there. You know what? For you, John, I'll keep the hat hair. Oh yeah, you like to see wet, sweaty bangs. We're gonna do a little hats off to all our comrades who are CEOs of major private corporations, I guess. What the fuck are you talking about, John? This is not how anything works. All these Leninist CEOs of private corporations? And yes, I was playing the Tetris theme earlier because I couldn't remember what the Soviet anthem sounded like. And Tetris is basically communism, but blocks.
Going woke is more valuable to them than making money. And in many cases, it's even worth losing money. And we'll come back to explain the corporate Leninists. But to answer the question...
Corporate Leninists? Can we get a corporate Leninists emote? Because that's pretty good. Just in quotes. Corporate Leninist.
How do we combat woke capitalism? We don't, because we can't. And the reason for that is that capitalism is a machine. It is a system. It is amoral. It's simply...
Throw off the shackles, comrade. You have nothing to lose but your bonds.
Monetizes what is popular, and it also creates and supplies demand. And so it's not a problem that can be solved with a few boycotting campaigns or what have you, but rather the symptom of a problem that will take decades to solve, assuming that we can even solve it. And that problem is that we have monetized our own self-destruction. Why is that? It requires a few components, most importantly being that there's a demand for it. And this doesn't mean that the demand necessarily exists, which of course it does, but just as demand leads to supply, supply can also lead to demand. Like you can put things in front of people that they didn't know that they wanted or that they didn't know even existed, and you can create demand for it. And it's even easier to do that with information. in the marketplace of ideas, because when you control the narratives and the flow of information, which they do, you can make people believe pretty much everything and believe it passionately. And there's a few reasons for this. You've got some people who legitimately believe these things, but more importantly, you have the masses. You have the masses of people who cannot think for themselves and frankly don't even have
Don't you love how John Doyle depersonalizes individuals he disagrees with in society and basically calls them NPCs instead of recognizing that the majority of people in society just don't agree with him? Instead, he has to act as though he's a big brain boy at the top 99th percentile of intelligence and everyone else is below him, and therefore he and like-minded people should actually control society and tell all the NPC plebs what to do. That's what fascism is.
Any interest in thinking for themselves. Like, so much of right-wing discourse is centered around, please, can you read these statistics proving that Black Lives Matter is predicated upon a lie? Bro, please, can you debate me on this subject so I can own you? And it's like, no one cares. They post a black square on Instagram because the screen people told them to. You're swiping up like, actually, if you read the independently conducted autopsy report, bro, no one cares. You care and I care. Like, that's great, but the average person doesn't care. And they will just conform to the predominant trends and narratives in society, which is why it's important that we take control of them. And this isn't brainwashing, by the way. It's not like if the actual brainwashing stopped, then people would just agree with us anyways. But no, it's not brainwashing.
Bro, people would totally agree with us if they weren't being brainwashed by the media. It's not that I run a Z-tier YouTube channel that no one gives a fuck about and I make terrible arguments. It's that they're being brainwashed by the Leninist corporate media. The internet's really stupid, you know that? We all have our little niches. My niche and how I bought a house on this shit. I bought a house making fun of people like this. Why?
To control the narratives to make them acknowledge the reality of gender, family structure, life, morality, and what have you. It's actually the opposite, which is allowing people to flourish in a society that doesn't seek their self-destruction for the expansion of the power and wealth of a tiny minority, and allowing them to do so without having to live their lives within a constant...
Thanks for the attempt, Daddy Sume. I think that might be a little hard to read, like once it gets sized down to emote size. I'll figure something out, though, but I appreciate the attempt.
Flow of information, because that's not how life was meant to be lived. But we have to do that now so that we can put the communists in the ground, metaphorically.
That's even more thinly veiled than in Minecraft. Metaphorically. Intellectually,
so that our kids and grandkids don't have to worry about it so intensely. And this gets back to the corporate Leninists, and I'm using that term loosely.
You don't say.
To describe a broader reality, which we'll get into. But basically, the timeline of leftist history is a cycle of exponentially more complex mental gymnastics where you take a theory and then you make a prediction based on it. And then when the prediction doesn't happen, you just double down and explain how your theory is actually still correct. And then you repeat this until you achieve tenure. And so...
Someone's a tanky. Hold on. Where is the tanky? Oh boy. Okay. As long as the tanky's not, you know, doing racial slurs or whatever, they can do what they want. I don't care.
So the original Marxist theory was that the...
As opposed to Republicans, who definitely don't do that. Conservatives don't take a bad idea and double down time and time again. Trickle-down economics.
Workers of the world would unite and realize their exploitation, and they would have a revolution against the capitalist class. But then that went ahead and didn't happen. And so Lenin came through and said that the masses would never start the revolution and that they needed a class of revolutionary elites to occupy the institutions in society that would grant them the power and influence.
I'm not a Marxist, John, nor am I like a Leninist or any of that shit. I'm just not. But the thing is, yeah, political theory changes over time and different people come along and change their like views on things. That's kind of why there's different labels for different kinds of political beliefs.
To educate the masses, and then the revolution could happen. Now, does this mean that every time some company goes woke that it's because there was a Marxist scholar behind the decision? No. Sure, like, yeah, some of these people in these positions that are pushing for this stuff.
He literally just showed the racist depiction.
are legitimate Marxists, but the vast majority are just overly educated, eternally progressing virtue signalers. But when it comes to who is allowing these things to be pushed and to enter the...
I know I've used Marx. I know I've used metaphors and even quoted some things Marx says, but that doesn't make me a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist.
The mainstream, that's a different discussion, because the people at the top...
I can agree that certain individuals made certain good points and illustrated things with brevity without fully adopting their belief systems.
They could stop this woke stuff within a business day if they wanted to, but they don't. Why is that?
Probably because it appeals to a majority of their consumer base, because that's how businesses make decisions typically.
Because ultimately, wokeness is good for big business. It's definitely not good for small business, and it's definitely not good for the economy, but it is certainly good for big business. Just look at where big business put their money in 2020. They know that this coalition, it's probably going to piss off a lot of their customers in the meantime, but ultimately it's going to bring them more power and more wealth because it's going to consolidate the majority coalition in this country to be perfectly aligned with whatever the mainstream narrative is, which is how these people are so delusional that they think that they're the counterculture despite having the support of every institution in society. What are the consequences?
What are you talking about? I don't think being against racism is counterculture. It's not. Ideally, it's just the culture. It's not the entirety of the culture. We live in an incredibly divided country where there are a lot of people like John Doyle and a lot of people who are Trump supporters. I think even like calling something culture versus counterculture, I think is a bit of an antiquated way of describing our country in its current state, because it's not like we have a mainstream and then a small subset that goes against that. We basically have two different cultures going on in the United States right now, and I'm sure you could break that down more so within those groups, but you basically have left-leaning culture, which is stuff like, anything left of Fox News, basically. You have, the CNN, MSNBC, or whatever, which I'm not saying are leftists, but they are liberal. They're certainly corporatist, but they're like, hey, isn't racism bad? People who are more in touch with reality, if corporatist, all the way over to people like us who are pretty left-leaning. And then you have the right-wing reality culture, whatever you want to call it, where it's like, Fox News, InfoWars, Breitbart, Newsmax, people being pissed about Mr. Potato Head and being mad about Dr. Seuss and thinking that Bill Gates is, putting microchips in shots and stuff, It's not as much culture versus counterculture as it is conflicting cultures existing within the same country. And I do think that's a problem. And I don't know how this is going to resolve itself, because I really don't think it's going to end well when you have people in a country living together trying to make a democracy work in which half the population is divorced from reality. Obviously, I think the right is divorced from reality, but they would say the same about me. I think I'm right, though, but they also think they're right. That's kind of how people work. I don't know how it's going to work, but I think classifying either as counterculture doesn't really give the picture, and it's trying to use antiquated language to describe a modern phenomena.
Consequences of wokeness: mass immigration, feminism, also known as increased supply of labor, also known as decreased cost of labor, promotion of anti-Americanism, also known as erosion of sovereignty.
Notice that, and he said, interesting, he said that in conjunction with undocumented immigration. He also put feminism, and both conflated them with an increased labor force, implying John Doyle is against women working because it increases the number of potential workers, thus decreasing the payment, theoretically, because the supply of labor is higher. John Doyle is effectively trying to lampshade here the fact that he is against women working.
Also known as global free trade, which has been bankrupting our country for decades. Because remember, big business has no allegiance to our country or to its people, just to their money.
I guess we should probably tax them way more than and increase social programs to educate people so they aren't relying on no education, low-skill factory jobs.
And while we have to deal with the consequences of their decisions and their propaganda, they can just live in gated communities. They can go live somewhere else. They are post-national. They have evolved past the concept of a nation or a homeland, or so they think. They're globalists. And so given this, I...
Three echoes, globalists. Oh no.
would present two simple... rules. The first one being that the state can either rule over the economy or the economy can either rule over the state. Someone's going to be at the top of the power hierarchy, and it's either going to be the state or big business. And the problem with it being big business is that we can't even vote them out. The amount of power that big business has over you and me in this country would be the focal point of a wet dream for a dictator of days past.
Oh, I guess we should do something about capitalism then, John. Democratizing the workplace, you say?
What does this mean? Well, it means that the government should be able to guarantee my freedom of speech in the new public square. That's what it means. They should have that power before some woke tech company has the power to take it away under the guise of private companies, which they ultimately seek to destroy anyways.
Then I guess you should nationalize these companies, John. Oh no, I sure would hate it if you started nationalizing companies.
And secondly, that politics is downstream from culture, but culture can also be downstream from politics. It isn't just a one-way street. It can go either way. Now, here's a thought experiment. Just ask yourself if these could be true. Is it at least possible that the United States of America, like many other nations throughout the history of the world, will reach a point where it will be impossible to salvage her? Is it at least
that happens to literally every country. Any political coalition, including that which makes up the United States government and its constituent states. Yeah, eventually, of course, that'll collapse. Maybe it's soon. Maybe it's hundreds of years from now. Who knows? No one knows. It's possible, but it happens. It's not fun, but that's just kind of how human society works. Things get built up. They sort of produce new and wonderful things. They collapse. Those ideas spread elsewhere where new societies form in different ways of coalescing. It happens.
Possible that the left, given how rapidly we've arrived at this state and given how
Let me put it this way. If the United States collapsed tomorrow, it would be bad for everyone involved. But let's say a likely scenario. Let's say the federal government for some reason ceased to exist, whether it be a slow thing or a, immediate thing for whatever reason. There are still local and state governments. So even if we didn't have a federal government, then we'd probably just revert to, we're individual states. Michigan would have its own government that would still function, and there'd certainly be a lot of shaking up and changes in terms of how taxation works and power structures with how you're going to form, militaries and stuff. But, people tend to form governments. This is how human beings survive, as we organize in complicated ways. It's fine. It's not good, but I have no emotional attachment to the idea of America itself as a thing. I care about the people in the country, which is why it would probably be a bad idea for that sort of thing to happen, because any sort of collapse is not good and hurts and kills a lot of people. But, I don't think John seems to care about that as much as he cares about, this almost platonic ideal of America, this Reagan-esque idea of a city on a hill. Fuck all the people in the city, but as long as you kind of stand away from it and metaphorically look at this, and in your mind you picture this shining city, then that's what's of value. Not how people are living in the city, but how you perceive the city in your mind. It's not good. I don't think that's a healthy way of looking at the country you live in.
Little power we have left in society will do that damage within the next 10 years. Is it at least possible that given that we have spent the last century losing the culture, that we don't have enough time or power to...
Have you considered that you should be better then? Have you considered, if you believe in just hierarchies, John, that if your ideas are losing consistently, it's because you have bad ideas and you should get better ones?
Take back the culture, which would influence our politics. Given that politics can influence culture as well, and given that we can still hypothetically win elections, is it at least possible that the only path forward is to win elections? Now, we reach the obvious objection. Well, we've been winning elections this whole time. We've controlled the presidency. We've controlled all three branches of government, at least twice. Well, what's different this time? So true. So true. I don't know. Let's continue the thought experiment. Given that our old attitude of don't use power because that's what the left would do, and even while they're doing it and beating us, we're actually winning because we have our principles. We're beautiful losers. Given that
I do not understand the imaginary version of the Republicans that John has in his head that operate very morally and within the bounds of the rules and don't cheat and rat fuck constantly. It's very strange.
that hasn't worked out at all, and given that, or assuming that, I should say, assuming that we care more about the future of the country that our children will grow up in than we do about these abstract principles, which, might I remind you, are literally the reason that your children are being indoctrinated into questioning their...
These abstract principles of giving a shit about other people. Who needs that trash?
Gender, into abandoning God, into hating you.
John, they're not being taught to hate you. Your kids will probably hate you because you're a bad person. If you want your kids not to hate you, stop being shitty. Also, probably don't have kids. You would be a really bad dad. Seriously.
And into hating themselves if they're white. Do you understand how
No one is teaching your kids to hate themselves because they're white.
incredible that is? That they shifted the literal United States of America, the greatest nation in the history of the world, to where it is now in less than 100 years. Can you believe that? How did they do it?
Europe being in shambles after World War II, leading to American domination in the industrial fields. Probably that one. Also strong unions.
They did it because we had weak people representing us, so-called conservatives, who in effect have conserved nothing except their status as losers. And I don't need to remind you that when you lose in politics, it doesn't just mean, we'll get them next time. No, it actually means that you and I are going to have our lives destroyed, literally. We don't exist in their version of the future. They don't want unity. They don't want us. So...
I don't want fascists. John Doyle can come if he wants to stop being a fascist. That'd be great.
Where do we go? Where do you think? What'd they do to the opposition throughout history? Think about it. But anyways, given all that, is it at least possible that the only way forward, assuming that there is a way forward, is to elect people to represent us who are capable and not afraid of wielding power the same way that our enemies have done to us in the last 100 years? Is it at least possible? I don't know. It's just a thought experiment.
Can you give me an example of someone you consider capable? Because I think your standard's relatively low when your last choice was Donald Trump.
I think I used the word enemy there. Perhaps accidentally. I don't know. I've just always operated under the assumption that whoever wants to take my rights away is my enemy. And given that the communists
No one wants to take your rights away, John.
have no allegiance to my country, I don't exactly know if I should grant them the exemption of countrymen.
I want to take away citizenship from people I disagree with, but I'm very worried about the opposition doing bad things to me. Feels like this is maybe all projection.
Are you seriously suggesting that communists shouldn't be allowed to indoctrinate tens of millions of people into
John, there is almost no, and I mean this, there is like no communist in power in this country. Communism is not a force in politics in America and has not been since like the 20s. And not this 20s, the 100 years ago 20s. So probably cool it.
supporting the destruction of the United
John, name me 5 communists in the federal government, and bonus points. If you name AOC or Bernie on this list, then you have to masturbate. That's the rules, okay?
United States and its constitution and its economy and its culture and its history and its way of life and its language and its values and its future. That's not very conservative of you. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because if there's one thing I've learned studying conservative politics, as much as I have, it's that actually wanting to conserve the country isn't conservative. No one actually wants to conserve anything. Even Mr. Potato Head. Yeah, it's a toy. It's still a staple of American culture.
Is Mr. Potato Head a staple of American culture? The only reason I know Mr. Potato Head exists is because of Toy Story. Did anyone give a shit about Mr. Potato Heads? Like, I know they existed in, like, the 60s and the 70s or whatever, and you had to buy actual potatoes and stick the things in the real potatoes. But, like, in the 90s, prior to Toy Story coming out, did anyone care about Mr. Potato Head? I don't know if I'd call it a staple of American culture, but you do you.
Conservatives think that they can just like let all the little things go. They can just prepare to conserve all the important things, but then they just go ahead and don't conserve those either. But
we're gonna storm Hasbro's headquarters and put a fake penis on every potato head in the joint, okay? You will not take the genitals away from my potato head. Again, John's completely misinterpreting the potato head thing. They named the brand of all potato head toys from Mr. Potato Heads to Potato Heads because they sell Mr. Potato Heads and Mrs. Potato Heads and baby potato heads that I think they call Spuds or something, and pet potato heads. So the entire brand, like if you were to go to a Toys R Us that doesn't exist anymore, let's say you went on Amazon.com, which is where you probably buy toys now, and you looked up this company, the brand name would be Potato Head, and then under Potato Head would be Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head and all the other bullshit. Mr. Potato Head still exists, John. Out of all the things you're worried about in society, and you're talking about grandiose, like, crazy bullshit like America's collapsing, and you're focusing on Mr. Goddamn Potato Head? He's a fucking potato! He's a goddamn potato.
But the reality is that you have to defend everything. It's the horseshoe theory. Yet again, you've got the low IQ people like, no, not Potato Head, damn it. And then you've got the average IQ people like, are you really upset about a potato? Then you've got the high IQ people like apathy.
I like that John is continually finding himself agreeing with what he considers to be low IQ people, but at no point does he go, wait a minute. Am I just stupid? No, it must be that horseshoe theory says that I'm actually smarter than even the most average of persons.
Towards incrementalism results inevitably in absolutism. Oreo is pro-trans, who cares? Me. You actually have to...
Oreo's pro-trans. They aren't even really pro-trans. Do you know what Oreo tweeted? Hold on. The thing he's saying is woke and Oreo supports trans people is... Oreo tweeted, can you even see this? This is probably too small. I'll make it bigger. Trans people exist, which is the most neutral statement you could possibly make about trans people. It is a statement of reality. Trans people exist. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me know I exist. At no point is that like being overly or even relatively supportive of trans people. It's just, yep, trans people exist. We must stop this wokeness. What a cancer. God damn it.
To stand up. I'm inclined to think that they would have just kept it Mr. Potato Head gender neutral if people hadn't gotten mad about it. But even the compromise is a loss for us. Even the idea of, hey, we're going to keep Mr. Potato Head, don't worry, but we're also just going to add more gender neutral potatoes. And then conservatives go, phew.
That's not even really what they're saying. What? He's still misinterpreting what happened.
As long as I can keep Mr. Potato Head, I'm okay. It's that other stuff I didn't like. But here's the thing. We all knew that even though they're potatoes, even though they don't have any discerning features, we all still knew that they're Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head. Everybody knew that. But now as they have their 21st century rebrand, our children are being introduced to these ideas through their toys. This idea of, well, if this potato wants to be this gender, then it can be. Or if it wants to be this gender, then it can be. And it can marry the other potato. Any potato it wants.
Yes, that's also a reality. John, gay marriage was legalized in 2015 federally? How old were you in 2015? Let's see, you're 21 now. So you were like 15 years old? You were 15. Oh, that's easy. He was born in 2000, right? John, you were 15 when gay marriage was legalized. It's not even like weird for you, or it shouldn't be. Yeah. Gay people exist. Sorry, is that out on a limb? Am I pulling an Oreo? Am I being too woke by claiming that people who exist exist?
Look, there's no difference between them. They're all just potatoes. And again, that's true. But what's happening here is what's intended to happen here, which is why they did this in the first place. And you know that this is true because LGBT organizations are celebrating this as a victory. So they'll say, what? No, you're crazy. They're just potatoes. But then they're actually celebrating this because they know what it's going to do, which is teach children the framework for what they will then be taught thoroughly when they get to school, which is that there is no difference between boys and girls. Not mentally, not behaviorally, nothing. And if there is, it's only because of social constructs. The only difference between boys and girls is their...
Again, I don't know what John Doyle thinks school is like, but...
reproductive organs. And even those don't decide what a boy or a girl is. That's up to you. Anyone can be a boy if they want to be. Anyone can be any gender they want to be. None of this has to make sense because it's being taught to children. And the iron law of propaganda is that the earlier you start conditioning, the less it actually has to make sense. That's why they do it with toys. You got the...
If John Doyle was allowed to teach a school curriculum or set a school curriculum, what do you think it would be like? World history up until sometime in the 1930s, with maybe a focus on a certain person's rise to power, but then we just sort of ignore the rest. I don't know.
Miss Monopoly feminist wage gap propaganda game. It's literally about brainwashing the masses, like starting as young as possible to be a member of the homogenous coalition of woke.
Monopoly is more like a game for like when you're 12, not when you're like 5, but okay.
That can be mobilized at an instant to give power and wealth away from the American people to the ruling class via the privatized propaganda apparatuses that are owned and controlled by that same ruling class. But hey,
I guess, again, John, we should probably democratize the workplace then, huh? Funny how that works.
Hey, at least it's not explicitly the government, right? Right, conservatives? China's brainwashing Muslims. What the heck? Meanwhile, American children are internalizing the same genre of harmful propaganda, but it's...
Yes, clearly, putting people in concentration camps, beating them, forcing them to do labor, and removing their cultural identity is exactly the same as teaching kids that trans people exist. Good comparison, John.
It's okay because it's mostly being done by private companies. I don't want the Chinese telling the Muslims what to think, damn it. Hey, Dad, I saw the same thing on TV about us, and we talked about it in school, and no, not now, son. I'm trying to explain what I heard on Fox News. What's the recent example? Hyatt. Hyatt got backlash for trying to justify that it hosted CPAC in Orlando. Sure. Keep in mind that's the exception, not the rule. The woke coalition is cancerous and it will infect everything. And here's another question. CPAC is very basic tier conservatism, very establishment, very tip of the iceberg. And apparently we can't even have that. Even that is unacceptable. Then what is acceptable? Ask anyone who's mad at Hyatt.
Not being shitty? Have you considered not being shitty? Did John not realize he could choose to not be shitty? Because that'd be great. If he wants more people to, like, vote for people he wants to vote for, he should want to vote for people who aren't shit. That'd be good.
Right now, and they won't have an answer. And it's not because they're hypocrites, and it's not because they're stupid, they're dumb. It's because the answer doesn't exist, because nothing is acceptable. They don't want unity. They don't want you. We have nothing in common anymore.
I certainly don't want unity with you, John. Stop talking forever, unless you completely change your personality.
There is nothing under which we can unify. It's irreparable. At this point, we're basically just fighting for control over the economy, the military, and the geography of the country.
Okay, you're gonna lose.
That's why we actually have to support the companies who are still American companies, not post-national companies, not even transnational companies, American companies. That's the most...
So every major company is out then?
Important factor when I take sponsors. So keep that in mind. They're taking a risk by actually prioritizing the American people and also by affiliating themselves with yours truly. iTarget's a great example. They make a sled that integrates with your smartphone.
Wow, that's a buttery smooth transition into your ad read, John. I know I just spent the last 30 minutes complaining about capitalism, but buy this shit because they're paying me to tell you to buy this shit, please. I know John Doyle doesn't have that accent, but in my head he does, so...
allow you to do dry fire training with almost any of your guns from your own house. It's epic. Go to itargetpro.com to check it out. Use the offer code Doyle, get a discount because we have to stick together. This is gonna be a very long process of undoing. I wish I could have sat here and told you we can beat woke capitalism by boycotting. But as we've explained, the reality is much worse than that, which is that woke capitalism, properly understood, is the consolidation of a woke coalition that seeks to impulsively sacrifice wealth and power to the ruling class because they've been convinced through propaganda that it's in their best interest. It is the monetization of the destruction of our country, literally. The day-to-day might just be, oh, Mr. Potato Head's now gender theory. How crazy can it get? But that's the macro trend. Hey guys, if you like this video, leave it a thumbs up, leave it a comment, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications, and of course, share the video with a friend. We love that. We love sharing the video with a friend. What's that? What's that, you ask? Oh, how am I going to bring the Garand to the new studio? Oh, you're right. I guess I'm going to have to leave it here. You know, I'm actually sad to hear you say that. I am sad to hear you say that because you're assuming that I only had one. Do you know how big of a problem hentai is? Do you know how big of a problem Japanese cartoon porn is? You think I'd only have one grand?
Why do Republicans hate firearm safety? John, do not point your rifle or gun at anything you don't intend to destroy. I assume you don't want to destroy your camera. Don't do that. Every gun is loaded. That's like gun safety 101. Every gun is loaded, even an unloaded gun. Jesus Christ.
This will defend. Thank you so much.
I hope it's at least just a replica. If it's a replica, that's fine. But, like, really?
For watching, and may God bless America.
He's such a... I'm me. I'm wearing a stupid steampunk hat. I wear tinfoil on Conspiracy Theory Day. I have a living room full of Marvel bullshit that I love. And even I think this is a little too childish. He's making fucking sound effects with his mouth with his guns. It's not a fucking game, John. Jesus Christ. So that's John Doyle for the day. He will presumably be back once he's in his new studio, and that'll be fun. So let me do some bits messages and we'll move on. I gotta respond to, I gotta respond to Baja real quick, 1 sec.